Welcome to the Paul Spradley Show, a show dedicated to real strategies from real people practicing real leadership in diverse and inclusive cultures. And now here's your host, CEO of the diversity training firm, the Care-Based Leadership Collaborative, Dr. Paul David Spradley.
I think it's me, but I might have one of the best theme musics ever. It's just so poppy. I love it. Welcome to the Paul Spradley Show. My guest today is none other than Chaz Kellem. I'm certain that you've heard of his name or seen him around Pittsburgh. He is literally everywhere. Chaz currently serves as the director of the Office of PitServes. It's the community service arm of the Division of Student Affairs at the University of Pittsburgh. Chaz has held a bunch of other very prestigious positions in the region, including Manager of Diversity Initiatives for the Pittsburgh Pirates and Senior Director of Advocacy, Race, and Gender Equity for the YWCA of Greater Pittsburgh. He has an amazing story, and I'm so glad that you're with me today to share it. Welcome to the show, Chaz.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I've been a fan of yours for a long time. We went to we went to the same high school together.
We did,
but we weren't in the same group, man. Like we had different cliques.
Yeah.
Because high school's a tough time for everybody.
Indeed. It's kind of nice to watch all of us grow up and,
It is,
and
yeah.
make a positive impact on the region.
We're
So
doing great.
congratulations to you as well.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. So you're in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
You've been your whole life. Can you tell me about your gift?
Yeah, so I was born with a rare bone disease that causes my bones to break with little or no force. So at the time my mother was pregnant and carrying me, she knew that there was a chance that I would be diagnosed with it, as she also carries the unique disease or disorder. And it's medically called osteogenesis imperfecta.
Osteogenesis imperfecta.
Okay. Good, well done.
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank you for practicing.
Often just referred to as brittle bone disease. Okay. So I'm 36 years old and I've broken 43 bones. So I have a very rare type 3, which causes the bones to break more frequently, but it does have a variety of types. My mom, we would never know she has it. She only had about 16 or so broken bones. And my type has really caused me to have limited use of my legs, which has then resulted in using a wheelchair for my entire life. But again, I've enjoyed this ride. It's given me a unique perspective on life.
What do you mean you've enjoyed it, right? Because I would imagine a lot of people would not say that I've enjoyed my having broken over 40 bones.
You know, that part has been terrible, right? But I think each journey has given me a new perspective on life. I see and interact with the world very differently than others. People laugh at me because I'm different, and I laugh at them because they're the same. Now, I don't mean that literally. I understand and I'm grateful for the way I see and the way I interact with the world. And I'm not looking for a handout. You know, I work hard. I inspire others. I motivate myself. And I'm educated, and I'm grateful for what I have, and I'm not necessarily worried about what I don't. And it's given me a very positive, motivating perspective of life.
Kids can be cruel, and kids can also be incredible champions, right? Growing up, having this disease, brittle bone disease, where were kids cruel to you, and where were they great champions to you? And even looking at today, how do you communicate with youth that might look at you differently?
That's a great question. So kids are naturally curious. And kids are naturally curious, and I love that curiosity that children have. So I thrive on being able to educate as well as inspire. I don't want our story as a disability community to be a negative one. I want us to pay attention again to what we have and use our gifts to make an impact on our community. So kids were the most challenging in middle school. And
because middle school sucks for everybody.
Middle school was hard. Everyone's trying to figure out who they are,
Right.
right? And what they want in life and trying to fit in. And now it's just different, right? The challenges our kids are going through now are a little bit different than when we were in middle school, but it was still tough. High school, I paid attention to who was in my corner and made sure I established good friendships, quality relationships, and I made sure I was active in school. And by using that strategy, I didn't have any problems at all.
Actually, you're now speaking to people who might be going through life as well too in that middle school, high school phase. You're saying being active, developing core friendships.
And having good mentors in the school, teachers, staff members that you can rely on and talk to. That was really my formula for success. Having a good nucleus of friends to support me, being active in clubs, student organizations, staying after school, being present in the school, and then having a good sense of mentors or people that I could rely on as a support system.
You're incredibly outgoing. Was making friends tough? Being in a wheelchair?
Absolutely not. Being outgoing, I think people were inspired by me. People were motivated by my energy, and I knew who I was. Right? I'm an African American male that uses a wheelchair every day. I own that identity, and I own all those identities that make me who I am. And I think people appreciate that. Right? The key I tell students now, even without disabilities, is to be comfortable in the skin that you're in to the best of your ability. And at a very young age, I was very comfortable with who I am. And that really motivated people, I think.
Yeah, that's tough in middle school, though.
It
right?
is.
Like, that's
it
tough.
was tough.
And so, like, what was the tipping point for you? Because, or were you always very confident? Was that something your parents instilled in you? Or did you go through a struggle space where you're like, I'm not confident or comfortable in my body and I have negative self-thoughts? Like, did you go through a phase like that?
Yeah, so hard times don't discriminate, right? No matter if you're rich or you're poor, no matter if you're black or white, no matter if you're able-bodied or have a disability, hard times don't discriminate. So I learned that very early, that everybody around me was going through their thing. And my thing just was different. And it was no harder, no easier. It was my own story that I had to own. My mom and dad approached my childhood with never allowing me to say I can't. So I always had a belief in myself and a sense of creativity that allowed me to thrive. So I didn't necessarily do it your way, I did it my way, but the end goal, the result, was similar. And that has always been something I've worked towards. So in middle school, it was hard. I had a new school, new environment. I was around a lot more people of color from my elementary school. It was a challenging journey. But in that, I got thick skin. And that thick skin, to this day, has allowed me to be the person I am. And I appreciate that journey in middle school because, again, I had to get tough. I had to get thick skin. I had to know how to be a little big guy, if that makes any sense.
Tell me more about that. What did you have to do to learn it? So what was the things that led up to you figuring out, I need to be a little big guy?
You have to adapt. You have to adapt to the language, to the culture, to the environment. You have to recognize that everybody's going through stuff, that you're not the first set of middle schoolers that are going through it, that everyone's trying to figure out who and what they are, that I had to rely on my academics. I had to understand why I was there. I wanted to give back to others, right? And that could be a sense of bringing extra food in my lunchbox for students that weren't eating, that would stand after school to help students with homework. It was using my skills and my resources to make the school and other people around me better in small ways and in big ways. And that really allowed me to thrive throughout my time in middle school. And I had to be a little big guy, and I was in personality, that was in education, that was in using my voice for those that didn't have one, and I had to get thick skin.
So you talk about using your voice for those who don't have a voice.
Yeah.
A lot of us that are in this work oftentimes are at the table representing large groups of people. And in America, I read that about 20% of Americans identify as having a disability. But there aren't people, there's a lack of representation in teachers with disabilities. There's a lack of representation in folks in Hollywood with disabilities, or even behind the scenes. What does that mean for you, being a voice for oftentimes the voiceless?
So that has been my entire career, right? Even in baseball, being a person that worked in diversity initiatives, bringing baseball to diverse and multicultural audiences. At the YWCA, the mission was to empower women and eliminate racism. Again, trying to help those find their voice. And now, working in service, it's really about connecting students to ethical, meaningful, and sustainable service opportunities. So throughout my career, that has been connected to it in some ways, helping people find their voice. Number one, I don't speak for them. Number two, I don't speak for all those with disabilities. I don't speak for all men. I don't speak for all people of color. I recognize that this work for those that do it is exhausting.
Absolutely.
It can be very tiring. So I've learned early to how to balance that, how to rest, how to take care of myself, and understanding I want to make change where I can. I necessarily don't want to be, or I'm not examples of like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Or changing the world. I recognize the audiences that I can change. I use my voice to make that change and hope that by speaking to 50, you impact thousands.
Absolutely.
And I use each of those times wisely and to the best of my ability. But it can be exhausting. But I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm representing or speaking for an entire group of people, because each person's unique, and I recognize and value that uniqueness that each person has.
So one thing that you said that I thought was, actually, when you started working at the YWCA, you were the first male that ever knew. I was like, how did Chaz land a job working for the YWCA? So at that point, I appreciated their openness. But you've, since college, have been very interested in people. So diversity, equity, inclusion have been a part of your worldview just growing up. Like this has been baked into your fabric. What would you say is the toughest part of getting people to come along with you in this journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. Diversity is the education, inclusion is the action, and I think many of us are focused on getting towards an equitable society. And it's about equity, not necessarily equality. I want each person to get what they need to be successful.
Talk about the difference. So I understand the difference, but there's folks that are listening that may not know what's the difference between equity and equality.
So the way I define it is that equity is giving each person customizing the needs or the desires, the dreams for that individual person, and helping that person customize that package for that person to be successful. Right? So let's use a school setting. Each student in that classroom is going to learn and be able to articulate the content differently. So equity is customizing the lessons or customizing the opportunities for that student to engage in the lessons differently. Where I think equity is what we need to thrive for. Equality, while some may argue has value, that's about giving each person the same thing and expecting the same results. And that's not the case, right? Some of your viewers or listeners may have seen images on social media where you have kids looking at a baseball game, and there's one standing on a block and still can't see, one is standing on the same block, and because that child is taller, they can see, and you've got one child that's standing on the block, and they can really see over because they're taller. That's each person getting the same thing. That's not going to work for our society, for each of us to get our piece of success. And that's really what it's about, in my opinion. Each person getting their version of their success, and customizing that success for each person to be happy. Paul, there's a ton of wealth out there, right? And wealth is not about money necessarily for some of us, right? I want to be comfortable. I want to be sustainable. I don't need money or riches. I want to be, comfortable. So I believe that there's enough wealth for each person to find their version of success, their version of happiness.
Which reminds me, you owe me $20, so that's going to help my wealth.
I got you.
Thank you.
At the conclusion, I may have to make installments, but I will get you.
This thing, equity that you're talking about, it's very individualized. That's a lot of work. So in a corporate space, like if you're speaking to me and I'm like, oh man, that's just a lot of work. What's the why for me? And because I think this idea of bringing people along is tough because people are rationalizing, like, I only have limited funds. You're asking me to, as an educator, to think about each of these students individually when I don't have enough time for that in the day. You're asking me as a business leader to think about my employees differently when I'm trying to run a company, right? I'm trying to, and I'm trying to make more money. So it's hard work, but what's the why? It doesn't make, how do you try to convince folks that that's their argument? Like, this is just too hard.
Diversity makes us all better, right? So diversity is the education. So I would tell anyone to start where they are, to have a hunger, a desire, an interest, and a passion to learn about people, places, and things other than themselves. The next step in that journey, again, the framing or the timing for each person is going to be different, and that's okay to admit. The next part of that is inclusion, right? Welcoming people into a space that's purposely, intentionally created to be a safe and brave space that allows people to thrive, okay? And that's the inclusion piece. Don't just bring me to a table because I have a disability or because I'm a male or a person of color. Welcome me to that table or to that space because I have ideas, I have interests, I have talents that's going to make the environment better. By using diversity and inclusion as the catalyst for change in a business setting or even an education setting, you diversify the ideas, you diversify the outcomes, you diversify the language written in policies and procedures, and you make the environment, the culture, ultimately you're diversifying the bottom line for everyone. And you're making an impact that allows everyone to thrive. I might not necessarily add revenue, but my diversity of ideas, I might be able to save you money. I might be able to create a culture that thrives to bring unique customers to your situation. If you're looking at it through a creative lens as well, right? As an individual with disability, my fundamental lifestyle has been driven by creativity. I had to do things creatively in order to have similar results as other folks. And again, diversity, inclusion, and creativity have been the philosophy for my life. And I believe that business owners, as well as educational settings, can benefit from understanding the value of those three terms.
I had a guy the other day say, I want you to be a part of my team because I need a black face. And there are people, and he went on to sort of try to clean it up after I challenged his words. But that is genuinely the mindset of some folks. Like, all right, so I hear what Chaz is saying. I hear what Paul is talking about on his show with some of his guests. And I just need to bring in a person in a wheelchair and a black person, and I'll be good. I need to bring in one person from the LGBTQ community, and I'm good. Or is there more?
So first I would say Pittsburgh, throughout my childhood, and I'm a lifer, hopefully, it looks at diversity through a black-white lens. I would first challenge that to anyone. We have to start including people with disabilities, the LGBTQIA community, our veteran community. Age is a main diversity thing we're seeing now with those that are hiring folks in the way that young people want to work setting. So age is an example. I think in that example you just gave, depending on your capacity, I think it's appropriate to challenge. So I'm glad to hear that you challenge. It depends on the capacity of that person if they can challenge or not. And then on our end, we have to evaluate our capacity. At what point do we take opportunities to make change inside of an institution versus outside of the institution?
Tell me more.
So, if I'm invited to a table and I know, maybe whether it's been said or unspoken, that they need to diversify a board or an office or an opportunity and they need a person with a disability, I have a choice to accept the reality that they have this need or want, and I feel that need or want, but I know my value and I know what I can bring to the table. So do I accept that opportunity knowing what the initial ask was and get it inside the institution, whatever institution, however you want to use that term, and make change inside of it, right? By being in, you can maybe do more by being in. Or do I turn them down because they only want one identity that I have, right?
Wow.
So that's a question that each person has to ask themselves when being given those sorts of opportunities. More than likely, I have chosen to accept those opportunities. But I know my value, I know my talent, and I'm going to go in and break down the barriers purposely to make it easier for the next person coming after me. And I understand that, I recognize that, because it's not about you and I at this point in our lives, right? I believe we are two very successful individuals that happen to be people of color, that happen to have grew up around each other. I believe we've had ultimately successful lives at this point, right? We're not done, But we have to understand that there's people coming after us. And what's our role to make their journey easier, better, and to give them more resources? And I believe when you're posed with those opportunities, we ultimately have a choice. And again, it's making sure I have chosen to make it easier for people that come after me.
Again, that goes back to that lift, though, right? Like the drain of doing diversity, equity, inclusion work. Because in that situation, yes, I'm thinking about my legacy, the people coming up behind me. But I'm also tired that this is the 15th time this week that I have to have this conversation, that it's much more than just having a black person. It's much more than just having one woman. It's much more than just having one younger person. Like there has to be the realization, and you use the word value. There has to be a realization that there is value attached to this person in like outside of this identity piece. That there's value, and that's draining sometimes to have that conversation. Like no, like you're thinking about this at a surface level. I need you to think a little bit deeper. I need you to see me not just as a token or as a representative, but as a person with value to contribute to this greater good, right?
So I think it's okay to give yourself a free pass every now and again, because this work is exhausting, right? And the hope is that there are many people like the both of us that are out there doing this work. So I would say to you, to everyone that does this work, it's okay to give ourselves a free pass.
Does that mean I can punch a person every now and again? Like
I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay, I'm not gonna. I won't.
I think it's okay to accept that ignorance and move, right? Because you're in it for the marathon, not the sprint, right? So at some point, you've got to, if you're running a marathon, and I have never run a marathon before as an individual in the wheelchair, but if you're running a marathon, I would envision that there's going to be a variety of peaks and valleys, a variety of obstacles that you're going to have to duck and dodge. And that example you just gave is an example of an obstacle. And you've got to choose, maybe you just run past that one, right?
Wow.
And maybe you spend more time at the next water station and you give the next person, after you've gone further down your marathon, maybe you've given that person more time at the next one.
That's deep. I love
Give
it.
yourself a free pass now and then. It's so funny working in higher education that I've learned as much from the students as that hopefully they learn from me. A student said to me yesterday a Q-tip analogy. Quit taking it personally, right? So that's something I've actually thought a lot about, is that oftentimes in our work we take things personally. They're directly attacking us, and they're not. Sometimes that they people really just do not know.
And that's the purpose of doing this podcast, actually, this show, because there's people that's like, listen, I genuinely don't know, and I just need to be in the space where people are talking about this, where I can just listen, where I can just learn. You said you haven't run a marathon yet. What's next for Chaz Kellem? Like, what are some things that are on your to-do list? Because you're the type of dude that, like, when you have a goal, you set it really high and then you cross it off, right? So what are some things that you still want to accomplish?
I've become a family man. I got married a couple years ago.
At you. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. That's my focus, is to really be there for my family and support the young ones that are around me growing up. I'm the type of guy where I prepare but don't plan. So I'm preparing still, getting better each day. I try to get better each day as a person, as a man, as a Pittsburgher. And I'm just preparing to be the best person that I can be. I think opportunities will present themselves over time. I'm very happy at the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm hopefully leaving a little bit of my legacy on the students that I get to interact with. Higher education, student affairs is a tough field, but we have a direct opportunity to impact the world through the work we do with our students. And that inspires me, that motivates me, and it's a great institution to work for. So I'm taking it day by day. I'm living in the moment, and I'm thrilled that we are growing as a city and as a community.
Did 12-year-old Chaz think that you would be where you are today?
Absolutely not. I am extremely grateful. I'm blessed. I'm humble. I recognize where I came from and recognize the value in that journey. I care about my community so very much. I'm proud of where we've come from. I'm proud of where we've gotten to today, currently. But I recognize the ongoing challenges ahead. It's tough right now in this world. Whether it's weather, whether it's politics, whether it's tragedies happen, it's tough right now. So I want to be the best community member I can be, the best man I can be, the best husband I can be, the best employee I can be, and I'm just thriving to be better. So no, I never thought I would be here today, and I'm just grateful that I am.
Yeah. Who are, we've got about 3 minutes left, who are some people that have influenced you, like who are important in your life?
Mom and dad. My mom and dad didn't know how to raise a young black man with a disability. There wasn't a book. There still wasn't a book.
Wow.
And I think that I'm very grateful for them. I had a teacher in middle school that really gave me an opportunity and recognized my talent. I'm grateful for that teacher. I had an employee, a staff member that worked in student affairs and undergrad that really gave me a wide variety of opportunities, and I'm grateful for them. And finally, I had a coach, a basketball coach. I'm a ball player. I like to think I'm a ball player.
Yeah, so we didn't have time to dive into that, but like you played like in a competitive league.
Yeah, so right now Pittsburgh, I'm an assistant coach for Pittsburgh's competitive wheelchair basketball team, and I love being around the 15 guys on my team, and now I'm coaching them. Again, the disability, breaking bones, doesn't allow me to play at the level I want to play or would play, so I decided to coach, and I want to help those guys be better men and be better basketball players. And you learn the most from people around you, right? And you learn the most when you least expect it. So being around those guys, many of them are new injuries, right, that are newly in the disability community. So being able to use my knowledge and experience to help them through the game of basketball motivates me every day. So I love that, and I love what a coach brings to the table. So I had a coach at Edinburgh that really inspired me and motivated me, and it was tough, and I needed that toughness. So I'm a tough coach, I think.
Yeah.
I'm a tough
You
coach.
just throw clipboards
Throw
around.
clipboards and throw things around and yell at
Wipe
them.
stuff off the table.
Yeah. So
I love it, man.
Coaches are important. And again, coaches necessarily, Paul, aren't ones that necessarily, you don't have to put on the uniform to have a coach, right? I look at coaching and mentorship going hand in hand. They're different. But I think everybody would benefit from having a coach in their lives. So I'm lucky to have a variety of coaches. Some actually put on that uniform and were on the sidelines, and some were not.
If people want to stay up with you, are you on social media? How can they connect with you?
I am Chaz Kellem, CHAZKELLEM. Real name on all the social media platforms. Would welcome in followers. I try to put positive things on that social media platforms, things that are helpful information, and I would love to welcome all your followers to link up with me on all those platforms.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you being on the show. This has been awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Congratulations to you, and looking forward to more of what you're going to accomplish moving forward.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show. That's our time. The Paul Spradley Show is available on YouTube. It's on iTunes. It's on Google Play. It's on Spotify and everywhere else that podcasts are distributed. So please subscribe, like, and comment. Keep the love coming. We appreciate it. Keep listening. And if nothing else, please keep learning and caring. Take care.